what I try to do, and I've never really thought of it as my role, but what I try to do in the space is I don't want to, there's kind of the way it's been done, which is, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's like kind of that counterculture style of doing things where it's like, our goal is to make it more accessible, So the way I try to approach it is kind of visually taking away some of the stigma as much as possible, which is like a weird thought, but it kind of comes down to just how you present the product or how you shoot it. And it's like, even using cleaner stores and dispensaries, using, even with what we were doing with you guys, it's like we picked very, normal's a bad word, but like clean setups, clean houses, we stayed away from the 420 Bob Marley stuff. And it's not that I have anything wrong with that. I'm a Grateful Dead fan. I like that whole scene as well. Yeah. And it's not that I have anything wrong with what has been done, but I think I've understood that like narrative that's trying to be changed needs to like come across visually, and it needs to come across through whatever platform. It's like, I can't just go into the way things have been done.
This is the Cannabis Enigma, cutting through the smoke to have informed, serious conversations for regular people.
Hi, I'm Dr. Cody Peterson.
And I'm Elana Goldberg.
Welcome to the show today. Who are we chatting with?
All right, so the interview that we've got for you to listen to today was part of this same series that we've been going through for series 2 from the sidelines of MJ BizCon, focusing on people who are doing it right in the cannabis space. And we've got something a little bit different today, actually. We did not interview Cody. I think you hadn't arrived in Vegas yet for this one, right?
Yep, I was working night shift probably at the hospital while you were doing this interview.
Lazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I interviewed Anthony Travagliante. I apologize, Anthony, if I said your name wrong. I did check with him how to pronounce it, but I may still have gotten it wrong. Anyway, Anthony is the founder of the Trav Media Group. And the reason I wanted to speak to him on the podcast was because that we worked together on creating the stock photo bank for the Enigma. We had this issue that I know a lot of kind of websites and advertisers and publishers and brands in the cannabis space have, which is that a lot of the images available, cannabis images, are really stigmatized. Like these images that either, have this full hippie vibe or a very like druggy, junky vibe to them. And we just wanted photos of regular people medicating in their homes, maybe sitting and smoking a joint with friends, just normal looking people. And so we gave Anthony this brief with this crazy list of different ideas that we wanted. We wanted some in dispensaries and some in healthcare providers kind of settings and some in home, this whole list. And I think about 2 weeks after we agreed on this whole project, the whole world locked down. That was the first wave of the pandemic. Exactly. But Anthony just did a fantastic job of working through it. And what I wanted to talk to him about when I invited him onto the podcast is how visuals and kind of visual storytelling can be used in the cannabis space. Because, I think as a writer, I have so much of a focus on the written word that I love kind of jumping to the other side and looking from his lens, mind the pun, because he's a photographer.
I get it. No, I like the pun. You can pun with me anytime.
Thank you. So I won't do too many spoilers here. We moved really pretty far from talking about just photography. Very well worth a listen, this interview, if you ask me. So we're going to play that for you now. And then remember to stay on after the episode. We've got a segment with Americans for Safe Access, talking a little bit about regulation and some current affairs. Let's listen to Anthony. Here at the moment with Anthony Travagliante of Trav Media Group. Anthony, nice to meet you in person.
Absolutely. This is a pleasure. It's nice to create some content together upon our first meeting as well.
That's it, indeed. So Anthony and I have actually known each other for almost 2 years now, but not met, because Anthony took the first stock photo bank, actually the first and only so far, stock photo bank for the Enigma. We started this pre-pandemic.
Yeah, it was. And I appreciate you guys sticking through with us through the pandemic too. That was awesome.
Yeah, wow. This was a project where we had, I think, 7 different locations that Anthony needed to shoot on. Of course, all 7 of them became basically unavailable as soon as we kind of signed the contract and wanted to move forward. So we did a bit of a kind of piece by piece. Every time there was somewhere where we could take some of the shots, like, for example, shots of people using all different cannabis devices, Anthony was able to do one shoot, send that over, and then we'd get stuck with another lockdown. Anyway, quite a journey. And beautiful photos at the end.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. It was what it created some, the challenge actually created some creativity. I don't want to use create twice, but like even the dispensary shoot we did for you guys, we actually took my brother's head shop while it was closed down and actually built a dispensary within it. So that was kind of pushed us to be more creative in certain ways. So it took longer, but we had some fun kind of having to work around those challenges as well.
Yeah. I feel like that kind of like, this is a sentiment that I hear echoed and I experience as well across the cannabis industry, that the challenges that are put in front of us make us kind of think in a more innovative and creative way. I love that.
Yeah, I like it too. I've always been good with kind of bobbing and weaving and working with challenges like that. So I feel like I was very suited for the cannabis space even before I came into the cannabis space.
Mm-hmm. So let's start there then. If we kind of like take a few steps back, how did you end up working in the space?
Kind of by sheer luck. I've always been a user of cannabis. I've always believed in it as a medicine. I have a lot of brothers, so if I say brother a few times, and it sounds like this person does everything in the world, they're different people, I promise.
You can use their names.
But my brother Danny, I will, because I'll plug his company, Lemur Genomics. He's actually working on selling these genetics he's been working with for over 10 years as a caregiver in Michigan. Mm-hmm. So I've always been in on the use of it, and I've always used it myself. It just never occurred to me that, like, not even that I can make a living there, because I kind of have no aspiration to grow or sell it. That's not what I do. It's like I know I'm very talented at marketing and photography and stuff like that. But it was like the two worlds never kind of came together. Mm-hmm. And then I had an opportunity to come out here at MJ. I think it was 2018, 2017 or something. I was hired. I just left the agency I worked for and was hired as a contractor by someone. And I came out here and it just was like bells went off, like, oh my gosh, like I could apply my skills here in an industry that really needed it. Because mm-hmm. I mean, even in marketing, I've always viewed myself more as like a storyteller. Mm-hmm. I'm a marketer, but I like to tell stories and I just do it for brands. So with cannabis, it's like there's a lot of stories to be told, whether it's the history of it, whether it's the patient's end of things, whether it's where we're going and destigmatizing it and moving it into the future. So then I went there and I started an agency to focus in the cannabis space. And we were named differently back then. Now we're Trav Media Group. And we've now broadened a little bit because of COVID. I mean, we had to do what we had to do to keep the lights on, if you will. So we kind of we're still very involved in cannabis, but we're also involved in some other things. But it wasn't as brilliant of an idea as I want to make claim for. It was definitely kind of like, but it's also something I'm very passionate about. So mm-hmm. it added to the passion I already had with working in marketing and telling stories. And now it's like, this is a product I really care about. And even the people here, it's like yourself and others I work with are like, everyone's good people for the most part. It seems like, I'm sure there's your sour apples in the mix of things, but I really like the people. I like the way business is done in this industry. Mm-hmm. I think on top of all the work we're doing with cannabis, I think the industry doesn't get enough credit for what it's doing to business. Mm-hmm. Even in marketing, it's like, I work with another agency as well, who's in more traditional agent companies, I guess they work with. And it's like, it's crazy how different that is than, it's like people here are so much more forgiving and empathetic and like even you guys with COVID and understanding like, hey, we're trying our best, but we can't use these, especially a lot of our stuff was medical. And it was like, you ain't even looking at a hospital, even now you can't really get into a hospital without certain coverage or like, even the vaccination doesn't really cover you now to get in the hospital. So it's to have people who are that empathetic and understanding and willing to do business in a different way is really refreshing.
Yeah, I found the same thing, really. I've been in the industry for a couple of years now, and I think it's about a common sense of purpose that everyone has underneath whatever profession we're working on. Like when you said that you first came to MJ BizCon, this was as a photographer?
Yes, and also I was hired by this marketing agency as a consultant to kind of help, or not a marketing agency, it was a recruitment agency in mm-hmm. cannabis. They were a startup, so they were very new, and they kind of just had me out here marketing, selling on the floor. Like I was just meeting people, getting cards, building connections. But I always usually have my camera with me, mm-hmm. and which I've found out that's a pretty good talking piece. Like people want to know who's the camera guy. Another thing that helps me a lot is I'll take photos of people for free here. Mm-hmm. Here's your booth. I highlighted your booth. It's kind of a nice like icebreaker, and it's also it's also like I like giving value first kind of thing when the opportunity is there. But I was here just kind of as a visitor the first year.
Right. Yeah, that's what I use the microphone for. Exactly the same thing you say. You use the camera for.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the visual side a little bit, because at the Enigma, a lot of what we're doing is telling similar stories of the plant, but often through the medium of podcast or articles or videos. I guess you do a lot of videos as well.
Yes.
What do you see as your role when it comes to kind of telling the cannabis story through these visual mediums? I
think what I try to do, and I've never really thought of it as my role, but what I try to do in the space is I don't want to. There's kind of the way it's been done, which is there's nothing wrong with it, but it's like kind of that counterculture style of doing things where it's like our goal is to make it more accessible, So the way I try to approach it is kind of visually taking away some of the stigma as much as possible, which is like a weird thought, but it kind of comes down to just how you present the product or how you shoot it. And it's even using cleaner stores and dispensaries, using, even with what we were doing with you guys, it's like we picked normal is a bad word, but clean setups, clean houses.
Yeah.
We stayed away from the 420 Bob Marley stuff. And it's not that I have anything wrong with that. I'm a Grateful Dead fan. I like that whole scene as well. Yeah. And it's not that I have anything wrong with what has been done, but I think I've understood that narrative that's trying to be changed needs to come across visually, and it needs to come across through whatever platform. It's I can't just go into the way things have been done. So I guess I try to encompass that. And then another big thing, which I think everyone should do, so I don't feel massively special about it, but I went to school first for filmmaking. So I kind of learned, I guess, storytelling and archetypes and beats and all that stuff. So it's that's the other thing I try to relate to it, is to tell a story that people can relate to. This is more so with video. I guess photo, this gets a little subjective, but with video, it's telling stories other people can relate to. And I've always felt this way, even with the music and stuff I've done in my life, is I like change. I don't want to say changing the minds, but I like catching the attention of someone who isn't the person who normally be caught the attention to. Yeah. So it's we can do a video on cannabis that if you're a cannabis user, you'll probably watch it. Right. But it's I want that, grandmother who is in pain, who is afraid to make that decision, or the younger person who doesn't understand it. It's I want those people who could pique their interest a little bit that wouldn't normally pique their interest. So I try to apply more classic story arcs to what we do, as opposed to even some of the narrative in cannabis and the destigmatizing stuff it's been done so many times where it's we have to try to do it differently. And I don't know how to necessarily do that. It's kind of not an experiment, but it's a different challenge with every company we work with and stuff. But it's like I said, I want it to be, not to just keep telling that story of it helps, it helps me feel better, but it's how has it, changed your life? How has it changed the life of people around you? And how has it changed your perception on it as a whole?
Yeah, definitely. I'm thinking back to the photos that you did for us for the Enigma, and I do think that there's something to that visual storytelling, even in stills. I'm picturing a simple image that you did for us of a first-time patient, or she looks like a first-time patient or first-time cannabis consumer, speaking to a bartender. It's in a fairly sterile environment, like you mentioned. She does not look like a standard cannabis user. She's middle-aged, slightly overweight, white woman with short hair. It's not what you would picture as oh, here's someone buying weed. I think even in that still, you tell a story. You make this kind of whole situation that you're sketching out accessible to other populations than we generally have in kind of stock cannabis photography.
Absolutely. And I mean, that even speaks larger to stock photography of I'll use the word diversity, because it's showing different people. It's I specifically didn't ask my friends who smoke and a ton and stuff and are in that scene, because it's that's just not what we were trying to accomplish, especially with you guys. And we took time to understand your brand and what you guys are trying to accomplish, which you guys aren't really that either. Not that shy away from it, but you're doing something.
Nothing wrong with that, but it's not the main focus.
Yeah, and I think that's. Yeah, and again, I guess to repeat myself, but it's that's just so important to me to understand. It's I don't like when I come across people who are so protective of it in a way where it's and it's not we were the originals, and this is, and it's that has its merit and it's part of the story. It's a character in the story, but it's if we want this thing to be legal, whether we're here in the United States, overseas, wherever, it's like we have to move it beyond that in order for people to more people to understand it. Because I've kind of went through this, like with film, what's interesting to cannabis is the same concept of like you have your creatives in film that are the indie filmmakers, we'll call them for a broad term, where it's like they like those niche films that tell those niche stories, and it's kind of like they discredit your Marvel, Disney type films. But it's like there's something to be said about those films too, and you could go into marketing budgets and stuff, but it's like those films speak to more people, and it's like they might not be the people you're associated with, it might not be what you want, but it's like there's something to be said about like a Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson who can do movies that speak around the world to not only Americans, but like they do big overseas and all the different markets and stuff, and it's like there's something to be said about that. So it's like taking that same principle, bringing it into cannabis, you know, that's how we change the world when it comes to the cannabis industry, at least.
Right, and increase your influence.
Yes.
Yeah, super interesting. So tell me, what are the challenges for you at the moment? What's kind of in your way as a visual cannabis storyteller? I know you do a lot more than that, but wasn't there kind of focusing on that piece?
What's in my way the most is legalities. Like, we're from the state of Ohio, and it's like we can't really do video there. Like we've done a series with a cultivator on soil, and it didn't get cleared. You know, and it's like so. It's like there's that's one of the biggest things is like we can't, which is also what influenced, you know, expanding a little bit out of cannabis, is like we can't do that everywhere. And it's like even being out of state, it then creates financial issues with like, it's like, you know, it costs money to fly me and my team out to Colorado or to California or to Vegas. So it's like we don't get as much freedom, and that could be an Ohio thing too. You know, maybe if I lived here in Nevada, I'd have a little easier time doing it. So that's one thing. I think other than that is kind of just some brands don't want to break the mold, you know, so they're stuck in certain molds. So I think that sometimes is a challenge to, at least personally, to try to present something a little different where they end up wanting something a little more traditional, which is fine. I mean, that's their brand, and I view my job always as someone who I'm here working for the brand. I'm not working for myself, kind of thing. But I think legality issues is probably the biggest one we face, just because it shoots so many good ideas down to where you're backed into the wall of like, it's like your idea starts up here and it's like then you end up just doing your classic thing because it's all that's allowed. Or, you know, even going in, like in Ohio, we have to do, like a lot of times we release the content we do because we can release it, no one else can. But yeah, it's probably still and it changes every state too. So that's the other thing here that's complicated, is it's like what I can do here, I can't do there, and I can't do it over there, but I can do it here. So we ourselves, but that's kind of what a part of our value is that we understand that, and we do our best to work around those things. You know, events are always easy to do, like live events. That's kind of what we're here for with the Grasslands. Grasslands, one of our clients, we're here with them and their team supporting.
Big party tonight.
That's a fun one for us to be hired for, because that was actually my first experience in the cannabis space. Is I landed that year I came here, and we went to the Grasslands party because we knew someone, and it's like now we're full circle, kind of where we work so closely with them and stuff. So that's also fun for me in the space, is kind of watching these relationships evolve.
Yeah, it must be super rewarding. I want to circle back onto something you said before about, you know, you have all these ideas and then they don't get approved. Approved by whom?
Well, speaking specifically in Ohio, is you have to submit things to the board of, I don't want to misspeak, I think it's the board of pharmacy, but there's a board that all these people have to submit stuff to. And there's these weird, like, they have so many days to turn it around. They can just deny it. It's all these different processes. So like with like this particular client, they sent it to the state and they shut it down. Or it's like, you can't do that. Or they will be like, you got to remove this, remove this, remove this. It's like every piece, and most states have some form of this, but every piece of collateral has to be approved through the state. So whether you're putting out a flyer, your website, different things, they have to approve a lot of that stuff. So for us,
the advertising itself.
Yeah, the advertising laws are very slim, you know, especially in Ohio specifically, but then in many other states as well. But it's so, that's what's so interesting, is you drive out of Ohio 2 hours into Michigan and there's billboards everywhere. It's like in Ohio, there's no billboards. So it's like one of those things too, where it's like, it's playing with, and a lot of the billboards then too are the particular brands who do it, you know, like cookies and stuff like that have their billboards, which are pretty much traditionally the same across the states. So yeah, it's usually like whatever board is running the advertising laws, which they have them even like in Canada and stuff. They're just different up there.
Yeah. You have to. I think it's impossible to be on top of all these regulations in every single different jurisdiction.
We need some federal, we need the federal government to ultimately step in, because that's they need to at least that regulate the marketing space, because with alcohol, it's not like you don't have regulations, but it's across the board.
Yeah.
It's like we don't have to play guessing games, and especially when you're working with a company who has multiple state locations, like a Cure Leaf or Cookies or something. It's like what they do here, they can't do elsewhere. So it's challenging for them to fully. I mean, it benefits us in some senses if they need an Ohio team, but at the same time, it's
limiting.
Yeah, it's particularly for us, it's very limiting.
Yeah, for sure. So if any of our listeners want to get in touch with you, your services, can you tell us a bit more about what you offer at the Trav Media Group across the board, and also who your ideal clients are, who should be speaking to you?
Yeah, well, generally we offer web development services, video, live event photography and video, and then we also do a lot of consulting. We do have the network for everything. So we do, we might not push video as hard, but we offer it. We can do social media. We can do all that different stuff. But to find us, you can go to travmediagroup.com. That's TRAV mediagroup.com. You can find me at AnthonyTrav_22 on Twitter and Instagram, or LinkedIn at Anthony Travagliante. Very reachable on there. And client-wise, we generally look for, not to be cliche, but someone who has a good, a story to tell, and someone who's open to, letting that process happen. Like with a website, we're and it kind of changes who it is, but with a website, we're looking for people. The process we kind of offer, just the short end of it is we try to simplify the web process. Traditionally, a lot of web, especially WordPress sites, are very hard to manage, especially when you have a lot of content in them.
Oh, right. You're the Webflow fan, right?
Yes.
I'm seeing this all over LinkedIn. He did it.
I did it. We love it. Webflow for life. But we do WordPress sites too. But I work with my brother Dustin, who could be found. What's your new thing now?
Dustin's just sitting on the other side.
Yeah, he's here.
The corridor.
I want to plug you properly.
Just mention Inhalables.
Inhalables, smoke shop in Brunswick. They were the location of the dispensary, but he helped build that and launch that. But he's worked a lot on websites over the past decade. I've had my experience with websites, and they're just a pain in the ass sometimes. So we kind of are, for websites, we're looking for brands who, we don't like to work with massive e-commerce stores or people who have these complicated backends, but we're looking for brands who are either mainly content solution, like content brands, or just people who need a simple working website. And it's there's a lot of what we do that speeds your site up, gets you better SEO, all that stuff. So we're kind of looking for small to mid-sized companies who are looking for a good branded site. With photo and video, we love live events. So any of these cannabis conferences, whatever, we love those. We do like with you was not a live event thing. So we do a lot of different stuff, but we do look for live events, or anyone, stock photographies, obviously something we sell, and small videos and stuff locally we do. And then with consulting, it's, just the two of us have had so many years of experience, whether it's in marketing. Inhalables is a head shop. So Dustin has years of experience launching a retail space, working within regulations of pipes, CBD, all that stuff. And then I've just, I manage through other contacts I do social media for these restaurant chains with 10 locations. So it's we have this data bank of knowledge where we just want to be able to help people wherever we can, as opposed to, I don't think we have the infrastructure to offer some of those services to the fullest extent I want to. I don't want to just be hey, I'll do social media for you, but it's we don't even really have a dedicated person to it. And it's just kind of those things. But like I said, we do work with Grasslands and our sister agency, Dallas Ripple Media too, where we can sell those services as well. But we like to work with anyone, who's ready to, it's I'm not very picky. I hate to sound like we don't have a target audience, but it's anyone who I can sit down and have a good conversation with, and our goals and, values kind of align. We like to kind of simplify. I think our overall thing is simplifying the marketing process a little bit and not making it so complex from a budgetary standpoint, not so complex from a, even photography. It's one thing I don't like to do is a lot of photographers loop in licensing. And it's you have to pay every year for it, and there's all these contracts and stuff. And it's we hand over the raw images, we do whatever. It's we want to help you, not just loop ourselves into these long-term contracted relationships, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, as a former client, I can tell you that it's definitely a very simple process. Receiving the materials, I highly recommend working with Anthony and his team.
Thank you.
We're going to put all those links in the show notes so that everyone can find you, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure meeting you. Yep.
Yeah, glad to finally meet you. All right, so it's time for our regular ASA segment. And today I've got ASA's Director of Government Affairs, Abby Rauderbush, here with me. Hey, Abby.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course, glad you could come on. And it's pretty good timing for our segment this week because I understand that Americans for Safe Access has just released an annual report, the State of the States report.
Yep, just came out this week and we are very excited about it. It's a report of the medical cannabis laws across the United States. We look at all 50 states and 5 territories, and we grade them all on 120 metrics. And at the end of that, we come up with a score and a grade for them all.
Yeah, that is a hefty data set, I'm sure.
Oh, yes. A lot of research, a lot of reading went into it, but we're so excited that it's out now. It's a great resource for people to be able to look at. It's sort of like a one-stop shop to be able to see what kind of medical cannabis laws there are across the country, because every state and territory is responsible for setting up their own programs. Nothing is consistent across the United States. So this is a particularly important resource for patients as well as they're thinking of traveling or visiting other states. It's an easy resource for them to flip to the state where they may be visiting and see what is and is not allowed in that state. So I am very excited that patients have this resource to use as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I assume also for, numerous different professionals working in the industry, this must be very useful.
Oh, absolutely. I think the main audience for this ideally is policymakers across the country. In this report, not only do we grade every state, but ASA went through and we provided recommendations for state lawmakers and regulators on what they can do now, what they should put priority on to fix the law in their state. So those are all individualized recommendations for the state based on what they're missing. And it's a great a great report, not only for them to look at for their own state, but to see what other states are doing and what works in other states. And so we're really hopeful that with this report, maybe we can get some kind of standardization across patient rights throughout the United States, even though there's not sort of one overarching entity looking over all these states. We are hoping the report can sort of serve as a starting point to get some sort of consistency across the country. At least that's the hope.
Yeah, well, super important. We're with you there. So tell us a bit about, what we found out this year.
Yes, very exciting. I'll start with our highest scoring state. This year, Maine was the highest scoring state. They received a 76.14, which is a B on our grading scale. The 2 lowest scoring states were Idaho and Nebraska. Both of them received a 0% because they still have a total prohibition on cannabis. They do not allow medical cannabis in any form at all. When we look at all of the states and territories that we graded, the average across the country is only a 44.38%, and that's a D on our grading scale. So that really highlights that even though all of these states, even though the majority of states allow medical cannabis of some kind, there are still huge improvements that need to be made. And I also want to mention about this year's report card, we totally revamped our grading scale and our grading metric. So we looked at previous grading scales and the previous metrics that we were grading, and we saw that there was a lot of emphasis on having a law on the books, but it didn't really capture what the patient experience was in that state. So this year's report card has been totally revamped to focus on things like patient rights and civil protections, product safety, consumer protection, affordability, health and social equity. And we also have a category for penalties where we took away points from some states when they were doing things that were especially harmful for patients. So this is sort of a new starting point for us, a new baseline, because we revamped the grading so much. And in future years, I look forward to seeing how much states improve or move up in the rankings based on this new report. And, like I mentioned, the average score is only a 44% across the country. There is a lot of improvements that they could make, and overall, the average score is a D. About 21 states fell in the C range and 13 states fell within the F grade range. So, majority of the states are not doing well at all, unfortunately.
Wow, yeah, that's pretty stark, thinking of like the highest grade being a B. It makes me wonder how countries around the world would kind of stand up to the same grading system.
Yeah.
But I guess,
absolutely.
I know that's not ACE's focus at this point in any case.
Right. I mean, it is an ACE's focus, but I have to say, as I was going through and grading this, I thought, I wish there was a resource like this in other countries as well, because I want to see how the United States stacks up against some of these other countries. So I totally agree with you. I would like everyone to make a report like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And to use that same standard so that we could, actually make a comparison.
Exactly.
So Abby, if our listeners want to dig further into the report, kind of look through all this data, read up a bit more, where can they access it?
You can access the full report at safeaccessnow.org/SOS. So like State of the States, SOS. That will have our full report. It's up there in a PDF version. And you can also visit safeaccessnow.org/rubric. And that's where you can read all of the details about what we graded the states on and why and what metrics we used to assign grades to the states.
All right, that's great. So we'll include those links in the show notes as well, in case anyone didn't manage to jot those down so that they can easily access it. Any other last takeaways you want to share with us before we finish up?
The big takeaway I really want to share is that no state program is perfect. I think some people have a gut reaction of thinking, well, a state passed a medical cannabis law, so that job is done and we can move on. But I think this report really highlights that the job has only just begun when a medical cannabis law has passed, and there is a lot more that we can be doing for patients.
Yeah, definitely. We've got a way to go. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Abby, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I'm Elana Goldberg. This episode of the Cannabis Enigma podcast was executive produced by myself, with production assistance from Dr. Cody Peterson and Ed Weissman, and edited by our friends at We Edit Podcasts. If you enjoyed the episode, feel free to like, rate, and share. It helps other people find the podcast, and it's really nice for us as well.